Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us today here. Today webinar is part of the Brazil Week Festival organized by the Brasil-Canadá Chamber of Commerce here in São Paulo. And we are going to discuss and talk about investment opportunities in Brazil with a roast of speakers that no doubt will be of a high quality discussion. To thank you, one of our supporters and partners in the event, the Brasil-Canadá Chamber of Commerce in Toronto. We have today with us Carolina Bernazzi, CEO of the BCCC in Toronto. Thank you, Carolina. I also want to thank our sponsors and supporters, ABGB, Cross, Watanabe, and others. And without, we have a very tight schedule, so without further, I want to go straight into the program. We will have a small introduction, a message from the Brazilian ambassador to Canada, Pedro Duarte. We'll have Igor Rocha from ABGB providing us with an overview of the Brazilian infrastructure sector. We'll have Bruno Duarte and Silvia Bernardino from Prentice Ross Watanabe providing an overview of the legal environment for investments. We definitely will have, of course, Bernardo Ortiz and Kima from the IBI group in Toronto providing their perception of how to invest in Brazil, the main challenge and their plans for the market. And finally, last but not least, Bruno Soares, Deputy Special Secretary for Investments and Partnerships from the Federal Government of Brazil. So without further ado, I would like to call for the message from Ambassador Pedro Duarte. Clayton, do we have a video?
Boa tarde a todos. Bonjour. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to once again participate in an event promoted by the Câmara de Comércio Brasil-Canadá de São Paulo with the support of its counterpart from Toronto, Brazilian-Canadian Chamber, and other players like this embassy itself. It's a great way to commemorate our National Day, our National Week, working as usual. I would like to stress that this is the 80th anniversary of the Embassy of Brazil in Ottawa, and is also more than 150 years of Canadian presence in Brazil. This is a long story of success, particularly in the field of business, and it's also a rare story of long-term success. Brazil and Canada have been together in business for more than 100 years, with very few moments when there were significant problems in this relationship. So this is a very solid base for us to build upon. I understand that the chief interest of this particular meeting is infrastructure, and it's particularly pertinent that we can stress that infrastructure is precisely the field in which we witnessed major positive developments between Brazil and Canada this year. Not only participation of Canadian companies in the privatization of utilities in Brazil, but also an increase in the interest of Canadian investment funds and other players in opportunities in Brazil, both from privatization or purely private business, and also a renewed or a more relevant presence of Canada in sectors of special interest for development right now, like renewable energy and biomedics, artificial intelligence, and other issues that are at the top of the agenda of the future, if I can put it this way. So we are very confident that the economic ties between our countries will continue to flourish. And as I always repeat, we believe that the only bad question is the one that is not asked. So if any of you might have specific aspects that you would like to discuss with us, or would like us to help you find the adequate contacts in Brazil, or information that you might need to make your decisions, please don't hesitate to recur to us. We'll be extremely happy to be in touch with all of you. I will be following the results of this meeting. I wish you every success, and I thank you very much for the invitation. Let me also stress that the same willingness to work very closely with you goes for the 3 consulates in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. Each one of them also follows very closely their specific, the local players and the specific fields that might be of bigger interest in the Brazil-Canada relations, and they work very closely with us, as well as some of our honorary consulates around Canada. So all these offices are ready to be in touch with you, and we hope this will happen very frequently. Thank you.
Fantastic. Take a message from Ambassador Pedro, Brazilian ambassador to Canada. And now I'd like to invite our partner in Canada, Carolina Bernard, CEO of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, for some welcome remarks.
Thank you, Marcio. So as I'm Carolina Bernard, I'm the CEO of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce. We are based here in Canada. And first, I'd like to congratulate
I'm not sure. I think we've lost Carol.
Hello?
Hi, Carol, we lost you for a minute.
Is it back?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Infrastructure, as I was saying, infrastructure is one of the main sectors for Brazil-Canada relations, and we've been working in the infrastructure sector for a few years, more actively this last year with a few exclusive roundtables that we've been organizing in partnership with Marcio to promote subnational and state level opportunities for the Canadian companies and for the Canadian investors. So we're very happy to be here today. And again, congratulations to CCBC, to the consulate, and we look forward to this great discussion. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a very successful event. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carol. Carol is a great partner. A number of projects of the CCBC and BCCC together. We definitely invite you all to get to know a little bit more of our projects and events. But without further ado, I'd like to go right into business and invite Igor Rocha, Director of Planning for ABDIB, the Brazilian Association of Industry, Infrastructure Industry, to provide a very in-depth of the Brazilian infrastructure sector. So, Igor, lights are yours.
Hi, Marcio. Thanks for your introduction. Thanks for the organizers for this invitation. It's a great opportunity to be here today with such a great audience. So thanks a lot in the name of ABDIB for this opportunity. I will make a presentation here. Let's just put it. 1 second. Sure.
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, guys.
We see it.
So the idea of this presentation is make a brief presentation about the Brazilian infrastructure structure, okay, link it with the economy. So first of all, just a quick introduction about ABDIB. ABDIB is the Brazilian Infrastructure Association that was created during the 50s. We have about 100 associates, more than 100 associates actually, including private and public companies. We have, for example, utilities providers, construction companies, manufacturers of heavy machinery and equipment, investment funds, financial intermediaries, law firms, insurance companies, among many others. ABDB, we had 3 stages to contemplate the infrastructure sector in Brazil, right? First stage was during the 50s, at the time that Brazil was a very closed economy. And at that time, ABD was inserted mainly in custom-made capitals, engineering, and assembly. At that time, the Brazilian economy was mainly focused in an important substitution growth model. During the 90s, we had the commercial openness and financial openness of the economy. Privatizations were made, concessions of utilities to private companies, and public-private partnerships started to happen in Brazil. At that time, we decided to include in our association financial institutions, law firms, private and public utilities providers, and construction companies. More recently, after 2016, we included also large infrastructure users and infrastructure funds, for an example. Why we did it? We did it because we saw that the infrastructure sector in Brazil was changing very fast, right? Something that was happening abroad started to happen in Brazil in a more diversified way, including a more pluralist environment for investment in Brazil. Nowadays, we have all these committees where we deal with problems, we deal with projects, we deal with issues of the Brazilian infrastructure. We have this horizontal, the so-called horizontal committees like sustainability, financial, legal and tax, ethics, international relations, privatization, innovation, engineering. And we also have these sector ones, for example, oil and gas, ports, roads, railways, telecommunications, airports, among others. All these committees, we have one coordinator. These coordinators are from our associates, so they are people with solid knowledge of these sectors. And with this coordination and with associates in these sectors, we obtain all the information about the sector to address and to deal with the government. When we talk about infrastructure, it's important to look the past and the present of this data, right? Brazil invested a lot in infrastructure during the 70s. And since then, the investment is much lower than in the past. During the 70s, we invested around 5.4% of the GDP. And nowadays, we invest about 1.7% of the GDP. When we compare the stock of infrastructure in Brazil, it's important also to look these countries. Nowadays, we have 36% of the stock of infrastructure in terms of GDP in Brazil. When we compare, for an example, with United Kingdom, Canada, India, US, the stock of infrastructure in these countries are much bigger. It's important to emphasize that during the 80s, the stock of infrastructure in Brazil was around 66% of the GDP. So this is the consequence of decades of low investment in the sector. When we split this data, we have, for an example, electricity with the biggest stock of infrastructure, and also telecom and roads. When we look, for an example, with the investments per year, right? It's a data comparing countries in 2015 right? And always when I present this data, people turn it to me and say, okay, you are comparing countries that are bigger economies, or if the population are bigger, or sometimes you are comparing countries that all these informations are not appropriate. So I decided to put different countries here, right? We have Vietnam, South Africa, India, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil. And China is on the top of investments per year, right? Around 13%, it's a lot, followed by Vietnam, and then we have South Africa and other BRICS economies investing much more than in Brazil. Here we have 2.1 because it's, as I said before, data for 2015. So we are comparing these countries in the same date. When we look Brazil during the thousands, we have a sharp increase until 2014. Then we had here a decrease due to the institutional, political, and fiscal crisis. And then we have the launch. In 2016 was launched the PPI, that we have a colleague that will present the program here after my presentation to the audience here today. And the PPI was very important to organize institutionally, politically, and regulatory in terms of regulatory agencies as well, the environment for infrastructure investments. It was extremely well accepted by the private sector. It was very important to recover these investments here after 2016, and to bring more robust products to the market. So it's a very important action made by the government that was maintained by the current government. It's important also to note that despite of this very important implementation of these programs, we have difficulties to recover the investments in terms of the GDP in the same level that we had before. It's because due to fiscal constraints, our budget, the federal budget for infrastructure investments nowadays are very low. So we have less than we have more or less 1/3 of the investments than we had in this period made by the federal government. So despite of the good thing that we have more private investments, good private investments nowadays, we have this lack of public investments in the economy. And this is very important because when we look at this table here, we have the current investment, and we also have the investment required to fill the gaps of the Brazilian economy. So we have this split in transport and logistics, electric power, telecommunications, basic sanitations, four segments that the Brazilian Infrastructure Association, ABG, covers. If we look, for example, what we invested in transport and logistics, it was about 23 billion of reais. It's about 0.31% of the GDP. And the necessity, what we need to fill the gaps for the next 10 years is at least 2.26. If we look the total of that we invest in terms of the GDP, last year, it would not cover, not even the needs that we have in transport and logistics. So it's very important to say that we need a lot of investments in Brazil in infrastructure segments, in telecommunications, sanitation, electric power, and transport. If we not invest at least 2.5% of the GDP in infrastructure, we are losing infrastructure. That's why I presented before our current situation. To fill the gaps for the next 10 years, we would need at least 4.3% of the GDP invest in infrastructure. So we have a big challenge ahead, and it's important we attract domestic, international investments, private investments, and public investments as well to fill this gap. Last year, we launched at ABGB the so-called Blue Book of Infrastructure. It was a book that summarized projects, the pipeline of projects in the federal government and also in the states. This book is being updating now. It will be, we will bring it to the market in the end of this year. But the better thing is that we will bring it in an online platform. It's going to be a digital platform, including not only the states, but also municipalities. So the public and the market will have the opportunity to access our website and check the pipeline of products in many segments that the private sector can invest. So we are planning to implement it in the end of this year, and certainly it will be a very important action for the infrastructure sector. So just recovering a little bit, it's the forecast that we did last year, in the end of the last year, when we launched the book for transport and logistic investments, right? So as I said before, we need so many investments in this sector, and if we consider what is being put into the market, right? What has already been what the market have already bid. We have these investments here for the next 5 years. Why we have for the next 5 years? Because when we talk about transport and logistics, the first 5 years in these products, and that is that part of the products where the biggest part of investments are made. So we have for this year adding in this sector 7 billion of reais. For the next year, 14 billion of reais, and the peak it's going to be in 2024, right? So even if you consider good things in terms of the private sector investing in Brazil, we need much more, right? So we need more products, and the government knows that. So BNDES is acting to provide and to build good products that will bring more investments to the market. When we look the sanitation sector, for an example, we also did the same exercise, and we have the peak in 2024 and 2025. In the last 5 years, the average of investments in sanitation was around 13 billion, with the public sector investing around 89%. So it was extremely centralized in the public sector. We have with important institutional change in the sector a significant. We expect a change in this scenario. It's already possible to identify advances in this direction with recent tenders to the private initiative in Alagoas, Espírito Santo, Mato Grosso do Sul, Rio de Janeiro, among many others. It's really attracting a lot investments by the private sector. It's a sector with a huge potential for the private sector. There are new investments foreseen for the delegation of water and sewage services, whose tenders are expected for the next year, with investments in more or less 18 billion of reais. However, it's important to note that we have these actions boosting the investments in the sector. However, we need at least per year to fill the gaps in Brazil, 30 billion of reais. So what I'm concluding, what I'd like to conclude here very briefly is that we have huge gaps in Brazil. What the private sector is doing in Brazil, it's very important. It's important to attract all kind of mechanisms and many kinds of sources of investments, external and domestic investments. It's important also to maximize this pipeline of products to the private sector. And one of the diamonds, let's say like that, in Brazil nowadays, I think the great opportunities are in sanitation and transport and logistics, because we have huge gaps in these two sectors. More details about this pipeline of projects, my colleague of the PPI, the program of investment partnerships from the federal government will present here to this audience. And I'd like to thank the opportunity to make this quick presentation here today. Thanks, Marcio.
Thank you, Igor. Great presentation always. Very complex, of course, subject. Difficult to make a full overview in a short minutes, but hopefully this discussion won't stop here. So I now invite Bruno Soares, Deputy Secretary for the Privatization Secretary, to give an overview of what is the pipeline of projects, what's cooking at the federal level. So, Bruno, if I may put you on the spot.
Thank you, Marcio. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the Brasil-Canadá Chamber of Commerce, represented here by President Ronaldo Ramos, and congratulate them for organizing this event. I also greet and welcome the Consulate General of Canada in São Paulo, represented here by Consul Heather Cameron and Mr. Márcio. It's a pleasure to have this meeting, this opportunity to show a little of our work and current portfolio. The partnership with Canadian investors is long-standing, and the presence in PPI projects is significant in energy, renewable energy, ports, warrants, sewage treatment. So I think it's worth a brief explanation about the investment partnership program in Brazil for those who by chance do not know, and present some of the main projects in the portfolio. So let me put a presentation to guide here. Just a second. Okay.
Yep, we got it. We see.
Got it?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. So you see the presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the investment partnership program, like Igor said, was created in 2016 with the purpose of expanding the investment in infrastructure and strengthening the interaction between the state and the private sector, creating investment opportunities and improving the quality of our infrastructure. The program is composed of a council which recommends the projects that make up the portfolio to the President of the Republic. And the council they have the support of this special secretariat that I work. It's composed of 7 ministers of state and 3 CEOs of the largest public banks here in Brazil. And it's chaired by the Minister of Economy. We at the Special Secretary serve as an executive secretary of the board, providing operational support and functioning as a hub in the program. Okay, the structure involves dialogue with different stakeholders, and it's facilitated by the PPI. There is interaction with the parliament, with investors like you guys, with the audit court, secretarial agents, and so on. The interaction allows us to improve projects and implement best practices. We see best practice overseas, and we incorporate here in Brazil. One of the program's objectives is to provide, like here, transparency, credibility, and predictability in the structuring of projects. We know that is worth for investors to this credibility, this transparency, and this predictability that they can allow their time to study the projects, right? Well, since 2019, 112 auctions were already held. These represent something like $109 billion in contracted investments. It's estimated, plus 25 billion bonus for the Brazilian National Treasure. 36 of these auctions were carried out in 2019 in the oil and gas sector, energy, one railroad in the railroad sector, right, which represents the resumption of investments in this mode of transport, in port terminals, mining, highways, and airports. There were 12 airports divided in 3 blocks in 2019. In 2020, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of auctions was significantly reduced, and the structuring work continued, right? 29 auctions were carried out, and already with results from a much more diversified portfolio when we compare to the 2019. In addition to the transport and energy infrastructure sectors, we completed projects in parks and in support of subnational entities, more specifically basic sanitation, like Igor said, one of our jewels of the crown, and public lighting. This year, 47 auctions were already held so far. This represents 12 billion in investment contracted in the sectors, again, railway, energy, highway, airports, mining, sanitation, ports, park, forests, and the first fishing terminal concession. It's a lower ticket infrastructure, but very important in social terms and on sanitary conditions for the fishers and the fish export. Well, without further ado, talking about the past, we have our current portfolio. PPI's portfolio is dynamic, right? And it works like a project factory. Currently, we have 197 projects being structured in the program in the most diverse sectors. As you can see, a much larger and more diversified portfolio than it was 2 years ago. There are projects in the area of defense and security, communication, with emphasis here on 5G and the post office. 7 fishing terminals. Like I said, last year we had the first fishing terminal. Now we have more 7 being structured. 28 projects for parks and forest concessions, are very important. These for environmental, to conserve the environmental, doing these forest concessions that the private sector can help us taking care of our precious forests. We have intensified highway projects with now 22 concessions being structured, continued with railways with 11 projects, including renovations of new concessions and privatization, 26 airports, 44 projects in the port sector, and 2 urban mobility privatizations. I will talk a little bit more ahead. In addition to energy and oil gas, like business as usual. I'm going to make short notes on some of the projects very quickly, so I can I've been successful in passing on the overview of a big portfolio in such a short time. If one from the team, okay, if one on the audience can ask me after or be in contact with our team, feel free. I will leave the presentation, the complete presentation for you. In railways, in airports, as I can see, I can destack here the concession of our last round of airports being administered by our SOE, our state enterprise Infraero. It's the 7th round. It's composed by two big airports carrying out other minor airports. It's the São Paulo one, Congonhas, in the block São Paulo, Mato Grosso do Sul, with investment of almost $1 billion expected in investments in this block, and the Santos Dumont in Rio, on the block Rio de Janeiro, Minas Gerais, with expected of $500 million in investment. Talking about railroads, I would like to highlight Ferrogrão, a greenfield project with investment estimated in order of $4.3 billion, which aims to transport grain from the Midwest to north of the country. Currently, this route is carried out by a road model, the BR-163. In highways, I would like to highlight the concession of Dutra, the country's main highway connecting the two largest capital here in Brazil, São Paulo to Rio de Janeiro. It has already scheduled the auction for this year, and also the BR-381, which is up for a notice, already on the notice consultation for the public, and we expect to have the auction on November of this year. We already launched the notice for investors. It's a highway very important to the connection between the southeast to the northeast of the country. Ports. I would like to highlight the privatization of Porto de Vitória. It's a CODESA, it's an SOE that we have, because it will be the first SOE, the first port privatized by the federal government, instead of doing port terminals. And you will open the way to the Porto de Santos, the largest of South America, of Latin America. So we are already structuring the privatization of Porto de Santos as well. But CODESA it's already on our audit court. So we expect to launch the notice this year, so it's the next one to be auctioned. Mining sectors, a lot of projects available in all parts of the country. Oil and gas, I will highlight the transfer of rights on blocks of two blocks, the CEP and Atapu. Like I said, it's the oil and gas sector. It's an outlier of expected investments and bonus. So we expected just for these two blocks more than $40 billion of investments. In electric power, new energy generation, with auctions already scheduled for this month, later this month, 30th of September, and the second auction of the transmission transmission lines of 2021, with auction scheduled to December. But on the electric power, I will highlight ahead of this presentation the privatization of Eletrobras, the capitalization of Eletrobras. In communication, like I said before, the 5G. So the 5G, the audit court concluded the analysis. So the auction rules were published, and the auction session is scheduled for the next month. Also, I'm looking for the time here. We have a lot of national parks. There are really beautiful parks that we have to improve the visitation, the tourism in this park, bringing the private sector to attract tourism at the same time to help us to protect these national parks. So we last year we had the concession of Serra Geral and Aparados da Serra on the south of Brazil. It was a successful auction. So the next one we expect to be the renewal of Foz do Iguaçu, the national park of Foz do Iguaçu. It's like compared to Niagara Falls that I've been before. It's really beautiful. So continue here, session of forest for recreation activities, and also for the exploration, the right way to explore the forest. So it's a way to preserve our forest, less deforestation, less fires, greater control, and a better fight against illegal activities. Also have national heritage sites that we are doing PPPs, and focus now on digitization, the privatization of SOEs. I can highlight here Eletrobras. Like I said before, we are doing the structuring of privatization of Eletrobras, and the capitalization is expected to occur on the February of the next year. We had already the bill that allowed us to privatization Eletrobras approved by the Congress, and now we are with the way open to bring the investors for this capitalization. And what we are doing is bringing money to the company, and the federal government will be diluted. We will not follow this capitalization to lose the control of the company, and make possible that the privatization help us on this job to increase the investments in infrastructure so needed, that like Igor said before. Also, I will highlight the privatization of our national post office, the Correios. We are on two ways doing these projects. One is structuring with help of the BNDES, our development bank, structuring this statization, making the evaluation of the company, making the writing the contract to universalize for the universalization of the service. And also we are discussing the bill on the Senate. It was approved on the lower chamber, and now we are discussing it on the National Congress with a good perspective to be approved also on this month. Porto de Santos, I already said, so I can highlight here, pinpoint CBTU. CBTU, it's operates urban mobility in major in Belo Horizonte. It's with our study advanced, and we expected to the auction to be held on the April of the next year. I think I have here. It facilitates to show you. So this is what it's scheduled nowadays for the privatization of the company. For CBTU will be a privatization with concession of the operating line 1 and the building of another line 2 of Belo Horizonte. Here, like I said, I will leave the presentation to you with more details of the privatization of these companies, Eletrobras, with the next steps that we are our job here. The National Post Office with the schedule also, like I said, for the first quarter of the next year. Transurb and CBTU, that is the mobility that we expect for the first quarter as well. Line 2 of Metropolitan that I just said. And for the last but not least, the support the PPI do for the subnational government. A quick overview here of the opportunities that we are supporting the subnational governments to carry the projects. There are 46 projects carried out by FEP. It's a Caixa Econômica Federal, a fund that the federal government have supporting the federal government. It's a vehicle that the federal government support the subnationals to structuring public street lighting, water and service projects, water, urban drainage, solid waste, and also BNDES as well, doing a good job to launch projects for the private investors. So 46 projects, like Igor said, the challenge of universalizing basic sanitation, we expected more than 150 billion in investments until 2030. It's not 33, but 30. I will correct it. And it's we have split it in the ones that are carried out by Caixa Econômica with FEP and BNDES. These are the projects that are already being structured from both of these banks. And for the last, the picture with what we expect for 2021. 54 assets to be carry the auctions. Much of them with the auctions already scheduled with dates on to go to São Paulo, to the B3 in São Paulo to bring the investors there to make their bids. So I think I already highlighted them, like Dutra with 29 of October of the next month, and BR 381 on the November. So this is I think what the investors pretty much like to see, but because it's concrete, it's projects that are very mature to go to bring the partnership with the private sector. And also I leave here the portfolio that are expected to be concluded on the next year. Once again, thank you, Marcio, for the opportunity. I expect that not to say too much. It's very hard to with such a large portfolio, but thank you for this opportunity.
It's always a challenge to present so much in a few slides, Bruno. You actually done much better than I would expect. But clearly, the privatization program, privatization concession program under PPI is very active, very attractive to Canadian companies and investors, and to others, of course. So I'm very glad to actually let everybody know that Bruno and Secretary Marta will be presenting at the PPP forum in Toronto in November, which is the largest PPP forum in the world. And I'm quite certain that the presentation will bring a thrill of excitement as well. So, but anyways, thank you very much for being here with us today. Without further ado, I would like to invite Silvia Gouveia and Bruno Duarte from Trent Watanabe to talk a little bit on this very easy topic of legal environment.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Silvia Bernardino. I'm a senior associate of Trent Watanabe. I'm based here in São Paulo. And I work with corporate and M&A, also including infrastructure M&A. And today I'm going to present some legal aspects together with my colleague Bruno Duarte. He also works for Trent Watanabe, but with the regulatory legal aspects. So I'll let Bruno start with the regulatory aspects, and after I will provide some comments regarding infrastructures M&As here in Brazil.
Thank you, Silvia. Hello, everyone. As Silvia mentioned, my name is Bruno Duarte. I'm a senior associate from the Public Law and Regulatory group in Brazil, and we work hand to hand with the M&A team on complex infrastructure projects. And our idea here is to discuss with you and present to you a bit of practical matter related to hurdles and challenges that we often see based on our experience, mostly with that foreign investors face when participating in public tender for infrastructure projects. We're doing this because, as Bruno from PPI already explained and demonstrated the portfolio, and the idea is to at least help avoiding certain situations and risks that usually occur. The first thing is the participation in the public tender should not begin at the publishing of the RFP, of the request for proposal, okay? It's very, very important especially for complex projects to monitor and watch out for the potential public tender since the beginning, because especially one, you usually have between 60, 120, sometimes 180 days between the publishing of the RFP and the delivery of the documents. This may not be enough time for you to especially conduct technical assessment, economic assessment, go through decision procedures and see if you are going to participate in the public tender or not. That's one thing. The second thing is that, especially for infrastructure concessions, the timeline involves, prior to the publishing of the RFP, a public consultation procedure under which the entity that's conducting the public tender will present a draft of the RFP, a draft of the contract, the concession contract or the privatization or etc., and technical documents and etc. These will be subject to public hearings and to inputs from everyone. This is the most important moment to analyze a potential project, because at this stage, you have way more chances of, let's say, challenging a provision or questioning that they should include this or that rule, okay? You have way more chances of success than after the RFP is published. Once the RFP is published, you can ask for clarifications and challenge the RFP. But usually the changes to the RFP are way more uncommon than in the public consultation phase. And the public consultation phase, it's natural, the reason why, because they are still working on the draft, so they will get the inputs from everyone. This is essential because there are some rules that once the RFP is published, they're not going to change. And if you want to discuss macro aspects, let's say you want to discuss in this specific case an FX situation, or what's the best way to deal with the FX risk, for instance, the public consultation is the best moment to do that. So in order to participate in the public tender, do not simply avoid having the information that a tender will be published and wait for the publication, because you may not have enough time. Okay, next slide, please. Perfect. Once you are looking at the public tender and its issued, there are specific challenges that foreign companies and foreign investors usually have to deal with. And it's important to have those in mind in order to avoid unnecessary stress or even risks of not being able to participate. First one is bureaucracy. If you are pitching in a public tender with a foreign company, you will have to present foreign documents. Usually, they will need to be properly translated and consularized, right? They will need to be authenticated in the country of origin and in Brazil. And this is a procedure that may take some time. And also, you will need to understand what are the documents that are requested from Brazilian companies, because that's how an RFP works. And you will have to deduce what are the equivalent foreign documents to those and present. And if you need to go to public notaries or public officers in the country of origin, this may take a while. And it's very, very important to look at this as soon as the RFP is published, not let this part of the procedure to occur at a later stage, because you may lose some deadlines here. The second thing is, if you are you have the intention to participate under a consortium, because we're talking about complex infrastructure projects, you will need to ideally dedicate to discuss the matter with your potential partners as soon as possible, because technically speaking, you do not need to have the consortium agreement signed prior to entering into the public tender. You can sign a commitment to enter into a future concession agreement. But for complex projects, usually what you end up doing is to discuss what are the main clauses and how the relationship is going to work in the future SPV that will hold a concession, for example. Because of that, the negotiations are pretty similar to negotiations of a shareholders agreement. And the good thing is the shareholders agreement procedure is going to be faster, but this will lead to more complex negotiations. Also, you need to have rules regarding exclusivity, regarding the possibility of one of the partners leaving the project before the proposal for the tender is presented, and how you will deal with this situation. If you have some kind of penalty, you need to avoid partners moving from one consortium to another, because they can simply go to another one and take you out of the public tender, essentially. And who will be responsible for what in terms of documentations? You have always in a consortium a leader, but and what would be the liabilities? You need to set this up all before entering into the public tender. This will take some time and will take some energy, and it's best to do this ahead before you're doing those discussions on technical aspects and pricing and etc. Other very, very important topic regarding the SPVs in case of concessions, especially shareholding. You will need to look into the specific rules of both the regulator of the specific sector in infrastructure and the contract and RFP, to see if there are any requirements related to prior authorization for changing in shareholding, prior authorization for changing in control, just notification. Okay, and one thing that happens a lot is we have clients with the idea to enter into the consortium and participate in the public tender with one company, and immediately change the shareholding prior to signing the, let's say, the concession agreement. Usually this is not allowed by the RFPs. So you need to look into that so you can already know how to structure which company is going to be a shareholder of the SPV, which company is going to participate in the public tender, et cetera, et cetera. The last point that's also crucial, and we have a lot of back and forth with clients, is specific rules that may be set by the RFP related to bid bonds. Especially some certain local but important concession tenders, they may have rules for the bid bond to be that are a bit different from the one that's usually occurring in concessions in Brazil. So they may have, for instance, a specific grading for the institution that will issue the bid bond. So you need to look into it to avoid presenting a bid bond that will not be adequate and being disqualified from the public tender. Next one, please. Finally, when you are interested in participating in a project, you need to look and discuss the draft contract during the RFP or the initial phase of the public tender. There's no possibility of negotiating the contract after the proposal is presented and the winner is decided. This phase occurs before, and there's a reason for that. It is because if you are able to negotiate or to change something that is material in the contract, other players that were interested in that, they would maybe present different proposals or present proposals when they did not present because of clause X or Y. And due to that, at the end of what you need to do is, as soon as the RFP is published, you are going to look into the RFP and the contract draft, and you will present clarification requests and challenges to the contract draft at the same time that you do with the RFP. Some main issues that occur for foreign companies and foreign investors. First, allocation of risks in the risk matrix. In Brazil, I used to say that Brazilian public administration likes to accept risks for force majeure related to earthquakes, volcanoes, and hurricanes, and we have none of those things in Brazil. But you need to look in, because there's a trend that they separate the risk matrix between risks that are going to be allocated to the public administration, risks that are going to be allocated to the private party, and risks that they mention that they are allocated to the private party, but they do not lead to sanctions. This is tricky because if such event in this category occurs, you may not have, for instance, the possibility of rebalancing your agreement. And also you need to look into, there are some difference, for instance, in risks related to environmental licensing, who is going to be responsible for that risk or not. And this is also connected to the fact that usually in Brazil, when you go for a concession or even a privatization, you will receive a bulk of documents that will include a series of technical analyses by the public administration. As a rule of thumb, those technical analyses are there, but they are clear and definite written in the RFP and or in the contract that the public administration does not assume or take any responsibility or liability for the fact that for that information being correct or not. You need to take that into account because there is a risk connected to that kind of information and analysis, and especially economic analysis and etc. Depending on the case, it would be good to have your own technicians looking at the documents and not taking them for granted. Another big thing, and this is for concessions, but essentially for any kind of contract with Brazilian public administration nowadays, except for very short terms provision of services or goods, you need to look at specific risks for foreign exchange. Brazilian currency has a big volatility, and you have some different scenarios that occur in different requests for proposals. Usually, I would say that the concept is that the risk for FX is of the private party, but there's a trend also of creating certain mechanisms to either share the FX risk or at least to minorate, to reduce the FX risk for the private party. You need to look if there is a provision in that sense. If you are in the public consultation phase and there's no provision in that sense, you can ask for it. And if you are in the RFP phase, you need to understand how to deal with that situation. And sometimes the FX risks all of the private party, and you will need to input in your pricing solutions such as hedging your risk. And last, you will have specific rules in the contract regarding what leads to economic financial rebalancing of the agreement, meaning what are the events that may cause losses for which you will be reimbursed, maybe not directly, but indirectly, a reduction of tariffs paid or an increase of tariffs that are charged from the public and etc. The concept usually is that the economic financial rebalancing occurs in situations that are essentially force majeure-like, that, but you need to look into the risk matrix and see the connection between both clauses in order to be sure of what will lead to that kind of economic financial rebalancing. So you'll have situations such as recently, there's force majeure is a typical risk of the public administration, right? The private party, if a force majeure situation occurs, let's say an act of God or etc., you should not be liable for that. It's common nowadays that they include that in the risk matrix with a caveat that they are responsible for force majeure risks that are not usually covered by insurance companies. Meaning you need to hire an insurance company, because if those risks are covered by insurance companies, they are not going to be liable for that. You need to look into this fine detail as well. And at the end of the day, for just to finish this part related to public tender, the key thing here is to organize as best as possible. Usually what we do is we design a game plan with our clients if we have time enough to participate in the public consultation phase, and we can discuss things with time. But let's say an RFP for a complex project is published and you want to look into it right away. What we do is we divide things, and it's important to be organized. So the first thing you will do is you will look into the RFP. You will mark all documents that are necessary. You will shoot this to the client and those responsible to gather those documents, while you go back to the RFP, and then you may discuss material issues, things that will be subject to clarification, to challenges, and etc. Right? If you need to discuss a consortium, you would start the consortium discussion on this first day as well. Without proper organization, we've seen companies that ended up thinking that participating in the tender would be too troublesome and lost opportunities that they should not lose, to be honest, because of timing or because of certain bureaucratic difficulties. And we know Brazil is a country with certain complexities, but it's our job to make sure that we help that those complexities do not avoid people from investing and from participating in opportunities in Brazil. So I now return to Sylvia, that will talk a bit on corporate deals and M&A deals in Brazil in a general sense, not only related to public tenders.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. So I will provide some highlights regarding M&A transactions here in Brazil, especially in the infrastructure sector. So the first thing is how to structure the deal, stock deal or asset deal. As a general comment, stock acquisition are more common than asset acquisition here in Brazil because it's less burdensome from a transaction point of view, and also is usually more tax efficient. So basically, for a non-Brazilian company to acquire assets in Brazil, it needs to first organize a Brazilian entity and have it fully licensed prior to obtaining the asset. So there are additional steps and bureaucracy to implement an asset deal. But of course, we need to analyze each project and decide which structure is better and which will be tax efficient. Auction process in Brazil is also common, especially for big projects with a relevant purchase price. There's the bid process letter. The bidders carry on the due diligence, and after this step, if they are satisfied, they're usually a binding offer and sometimes linked to the markup of the SPA. So due diligence is essential here in Brazil. Not only legal, but technical and financial due diligence are essential. Due diligence are usually finalized here in Brazil prior to the execution of the acquisition agreement. Sometimes some aspects of the due diligence continues after, but usually it's finalized prior to the signature. The main areas of concern vary in accordance with the project, but we always have the big ones, which are compliance, environmental, regulatory, tax, and real property. Environmental, to check if there is any contamination, if there is the required license. Regulatory, especially in the infrastructure field, to see if, in case of concession, if it's how it is. The Brazilian tax system is very complex, so usually there are contingencies to be reviewed. The same related to labor aspects. Once the due diligence is finalized, if the buyer, the investor is satisfied and decides to move forward, there are the negotiation of the transaction agreements. And here I'm going to highlight some most relevant aspects in stock purchase agreement in deals in Brazil. So in terms of purchase price adjustments are common. We have different types here. It could be cash-free, debt-free, or based on the working capital. Earnout are also fairly common, especially in transactions where we have future uncertainty. So, for instance, the renewal of concession, achievement of the COD, if it's linked to obtainment of a certain license, and in other type of projects when sellers continue to manage the company after the closing, earnout are also very common. In terms of guarantee of the liabilities of the target company, escrow is the most common. It can only be maintained by a financial institution that charges a monthly or annual fee, and the escrow funds are applied in interest-bearing financial application. But of course, we have other types of guarantees. We have holdback, pledge of assets, but escrow is the most common. Material adverse effect and preventing closing is also common. The definition of the material adverse effect also varies. It depends of the project, but basically when we have infra transactions, it can be linked to the termination of a concession agreement, or termination of an operation license prior to closing, or any loss exceeding a certain amount to be defined by the parties. Reps and warrants is also an essential section of the document, which needs to be negotiated carefully. So the investor buyer needs to negotiate to have broad reps and warranties regarding all the legal aspects of the target, including tax, environmental, compliance matters, and all the aspects of the company, and all the information required to be disclosed in the schedules of the SPAs. Knowledge qualifier are increasingly common, especially including actual knowledge. So this is important provision. Regulatory and governmental approval, especially in the infra transactions, might be required. So if we have companies in the energy sector or port sector, the approval of the government approval are required. The approval of the antitrust authority prior to the closing of the transaction might be required if certain thresholds are met. And we might have other types of prior approval, such as from banks, if the target companies have loans, or from PPAs counterparties when we have this condition in the PPAs. Also from the debenture holders, if the company issued the debenture. So we have to analyze case by case. Indemnification is also a very relevant section, which is usually negotiated a lot between buyers and sellers. buyer, the potential investor, wants to have as broad as possible. So, but what is usually common in the scope of sellers' indemnification obligation is the losses resulted from any breach of the reps and warranties. This is one of the aspects why it's so important to have good sections of reps and warranties. Breach of covenants of the sellers, and losses arising from acts, facts, or omission prior to the closing date. So my watch and your watch theory. But of course, in auction process, some investors, buyer might be willing to stay with certain obligations of the past. In terms of the cap of the obligation, the cap varies. It also depends of the project, but in infra project, what I've been seeing is an average of 20% of the purchase price. There are certain deals that we can have a higher cap or a cap for different aspects, such as environmental or compliance. But in average, what I've seen is 20%. Basket and de minimis are also very common. So the investor buyer will usually negotiate a low amount of the basket and wants to be indemnified for the full amount of the basket, not only the excess. And sellers try to negotiate higher amount and to be indemnified only by the excess. Survival for the indemnification in average is usually 5 years, which is in line with most of the statute of limitation. But we can have different ones, such as 6 years for tax or 10 years or less or more for environmental, no limitation for compliance. We also see 36 months for certain reps and warranties. This is not negotiable. Warrant insurance here in Brazil is not common. It's still very expensive. So it's not used in the transactions. So we have to rely a lot in the provisions of the agreements and in the guarantees because the price is very expensive. The governing law is the Brazilian law. And in terms of dispute of resolution, it's usually arbitration because it's salary flexible and the arbitrators have technical expertise in the matter that is being in dispute. The dispute resolution in Brazilian courts can take a long time, can be up to 10 years, and the judges might not be as specialized in the scope of the dispute. So basically, arbitration is more common. So as Bruno anticipated, if the intent is to be part of a joint venture, a shareholders agreement is a must-have for several reasons. Including for the restriction of the encumbers and transfer of shares, preemptive rights, call option and put option. So you want to make sure if the JV doesn't work, you have a way out or the other party. In case the investor is a minority shareholder, tag-along right is important. Quorum of approval. So in accordance with the Brazilian law, we have different types of companies with different quorums. So if you are a minority shareholders, you want to make sure that certain aspects, your approval be required. So the same goes with veto rights. And also with the appointment and dismissal of officers and directors of the company. It's important to have a business plan and a budget pre-approved and be attached to the shareholders agreements for the following years. And also be defined how will be the distribution of dividends, especially for minority quota holders that may not have control regarding these aspects. So these are my comments, the main aspects to be observed when doing an M&A deal here in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Thank you, Silvia. And it comes to mind that we can never stress enough the fact that you need to link your commercial strategy to a solid legal strategy in Brazil, or you may essentially lose a lot of time going back and trying to fix it. Great tips, great topics. So thank you very much. But to prove that despite some perceptions that Brazil is complicated and hard to do business, I'd like to invite Bernardo Ortiz and Dassar Kima from IBI Group. IBI is one of the largest Canadian engineering construction groups. They are active in Brazil since 2018-19. Incredible success story for us. Very, very interesting to hear. So over to you, Dassar and Bernardo.
Thanks. Sorry, let me.
There you go.
Thanks, Marcio. Thanks, well, to CCBC and the embassy for the invitation. You seeing my screen? Ready?
Yes.
Okay.
There.
Well, yeah. Thanks for the invitation. Well, I mean, as you know, as you have explained, I mean, we are a Canadian firm looking to enter the Brazilian market, and for us, it has been a wonderful experience. I mean, to be well in this trip, I would say with CCBC and the embassy, and the goal of this presentation is to walk you through what we have passed over the last couple of years, and we are happy of what we have been accomplished. But well, I think there is a lot of things well to go, and well, I mean, let me explain first what's IBI for the ones that you don't know us. I would say that IBI is one of the flagships of Canadian engineering and architecture, and well, in general, infrastructure engineering. And I mean, we are, yeah, IBI stands for Intelligence, Buildings, and Infrastructure. And that's, well, I think what differentiates us from other firms, because we are a comprehensive and integrated firm. We cover, well, I mean, areas from urban planning, smart cities, transportation engineering, water services, energy, and in general, everything that needs to deal with cities. Our approach is, well, our logo is defining the cities of tomorrow. And I think that's what we are trying to do in Brazil. And I think there is a lot of opportunities in Brazil. I mean, the presentations today just confirms our well, interest in the market, especially in these areas. But we see a lot of obviously interest and opportunities also in the buildings and the technology sectors. We cover basically every type of building, from well, hospitals to well, schools, high rises, and so on. And what we also do is well, we have an intense knowledge in technology applied to these two areas of work. So we provide consulting for infrastructure projects to buildings, and also we have some products and some services like well, obviously tolling systems, ITS systems, and well, that's what we are trying to promote. These collective services and products integrated to the Brazilian market. So well, just a little bit, I mean, a little bit more knowledge about IBI before I jump into our Brazilian story. This is where are we based? This is a Canadian firm, and the corporate offices are in Toronto. But we have a strong presence in North America, in the UK, in the Middle East, in Israel, India, and obviously Latin America. We have an office we are registered as a company in Mexico and Colombia, and we are actively pursuing opportunities in Brazil, as you will see in a few minutes. So we are, I mean, I think one of the main architecture firms in the world. We have been ranked as the sixth largest in 2020 and the fifth in 2021. And based obviously on our analysis of where, especially recently, where the Brazilian market was heading, is that we decided to, as a company, to continue exploring the Latin American market. We see a lot of opportunities, well, especially now in Colombia and, well, I mean, in Brazil. And well, we have started to bid on projects and pursue opportunities in Brazil. And well, we have won and we have been awarded 2 projects recently with the IDV related to the first one was the Belo Horizonte project. That it's well, a transit-oriented development project across the Exo Leste and Vector Norte in Belo Horizonte. And based on this work and on our international expertise in DOT, we had developed in the past a TOD toolkit for the World Bank, and we are developing this toolkit and adapting it for the Brazil market and obviously in Portuguese. I mean, to be applied in the Brazilian cities. So these are the 2 projects we have awarded so far with the IDV, and we were recently awarded these 2 as of well, yesterday. We were invited to negotiate this project in Rio de Janeiro. So we will have a 3rd project in Brazil, and we have bid. I mean, and started pursuing projects related from urban planning, mobility, origin. I mean, like demand analysis and well, tolling systems. And that's well, I mean, we so far we have been pursuing opportunities with the multilateral organizations, with the IDB, with World Bank, with the UN Habitat, and obviously private sector companies. I think we still need to start bidding opportunities with state and federal government projects, and that's our next step. And that's why we are thinking on well, hiring obviously local people. We need to be local to be competitive and really grow. And well, our main areas of interest and well, and therefore our capabilities are related to well, tolling system, ITS, smart cities, well, planning, transportation planning and engineering for railway or tolling projects, which obviously we saw a few minutes ago. I mean, the impressive program that you have. We have also, well, some capabilities related to water and energy consulting. Well, TOD has been our obviously entering point to the market, and we are interested to keep it growing. And well, urban planning and well, health services. So this is what we have done so far in the Brazilian market, and we are very interested in our growth in the market, and we are, I think, taking the necessary steps to make this happen. So I will pass well, the microphone to Mudassar to explain well, what has been our process and our path in this market.
Thank you, Bernardo. Bernardo, can you take it to the last slide, please?
Yes, sure.
Yep. Thank you.
There you go.
So I think the first question when we pitch our idea to our C-suite was that, the first thing they ask us is that why Brazil? And the answer was that Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world by population. It's the 4th largest roadway system. It's number 8 in terms of the number of motor vehicles driven on the roads, and 70% of the goods is transported by road as well. And the key area which I saw for improvement was that the only 14% of the roadways were paved. And there was a significant opportunity for a privatization coming up. Old concessions were coming to renewal, and we have a great product which essentially going to support all the concessionaires in Brazil. Especially our market research was primarily focused on the tolling side, because our product is being used in India, in Mexico, in UK, recently in the United States, and Greece as well. So that's where we actually started our market research. We reached out to CCBC at one point, but before that, it was Bernardo and I. We visited Brazil. I actually drove thousands of kilometers in Rio and Sao Paulo, tried to sort of like get more sense on in terms of the current competitors and what type of products they have installed on different highways. And from there, we got the membership with CCBC, and I think that was a great place for us because they opened a lot of doors for us. And even during the pandemic, we were sort of like able to meet 40 plus companies and secure 2 contracts, which was great for us. And these wins actually increased the interest for our C-suite as well. And we will be continuously pursuing opportunities, which include hiring local representation and more involvement with the Canadian embassy. There are a few lessons which we learned. I don't speak a single word of Portuguese, but I can tell you that I met with a lot of people in Brazil, and 90% of them were able to communicate in English. And in my view, language is a barrier, but at the same time, the key people do speak English. So if Canadian companies are looking into getting into Brazil, I think there's a great potential in infrastructure. PPI have a great sort of like a place, I will say, to start with. If they have a great website, you can actually look all the opportunities, all the projects you can they're working on, from water infrastructure to roadways, airport. It's very interactive and very, very useful for anybody looking into the PPI program. So, I think the one thing also learned was that Canada have a good brand in Brazil. It's a very respected name. The challenges are, you will see, which other panelists have also identified, the legal and the tax system. But CCBC also have great resources. They connected us with a couple of law firms and tax advisors as well. So I will say that there are some challenges, but you need to have a long-term strategy if you want to go into Brazil. You can't just go in and expect that you will win the contracts. You need to have a long-term plan in terms of business development, meeting with people, understanding the culture. In North America, we primarily focus on meeting and getting the deal done and then move to the next one. But it's more cultural, as you need to understand that how the business works and how you need to sort of like communicate and deal with the Brazilian culture. I think another important thing you need to, and we took a little bit time to understand that you need to have local presence to essentially accelerate your organic growth if you want to pursue the opportunities internally as a mean of moving to the next country. So I really appreciate the opportunity today. Marcio, thank you so much for inviting us today.
That's great. It's being a very positive ride and a positive approach to Brazil. So we're more than glad to continue that work. And I'm quite certain that IBI will soon become a very well-known name in Brazil. With that, I know we're reaching the end. I know we have some questions that I will ask Elise to sort of compile, and we don't have time for much, but maybe a couple of questions that we received, Elise.
Sure. So thank you, Marcio. So actually we have 2 questions for the Secretary Bruno. Secretary, what are the short-term solutions for a potential energy shortage due to the severe drought? Production at Iliosol Hydro announced to be stopped soon.
Oh, thank you, Elisa, for the questions. The government announced yesterday, actually, the emergency auction to supply more energy for change this shortage of generation. So yesterday was launched this emergency auctions to be held, and also we announced some programs to incentivize the population to reduce the consume with bonus for those that will accomplish the reduce with the parameters of the last year. I think it's these are the emergency one to path this critical situation here.
Perfect. And so the last question, what incentives can be offered to residential energy consumers to generate their own consumed energy?
Oh, thank you again. What I can say that Brazil already have one of the electric matrix energy power generation of electric matrix. They are clean with renewable energy, with more than 85% nowadays represented by renewable energy, and we expect that by 2030 to reach 88% of our matrix of electric generation of energy. Besides that, nowadays the distributional generation for the residential, they already have incentives. They are actually exempted to pay for the disco, for the companies that distribute their energy. They have exemption on the payment of this transportation of the energy, and it's a bill in discussing on the Congress. If this bill be approved, this exemption will remain for those who already have the system installed, and for those that will install this system up to 12 months ahead for up to 2045. So it's a great incentive for people to install the solar photovoltaic system. And also we are discussing some credit line with the banks with incentive to finance people to buy these systems. These are the incentives that I can tell here. Okay. Thank you, Elisa.
So
Thank you, Secretary.
We have any other, Elisa? We still have time for one.
No, that's it.
That's it. So, okay. Actually, I have a question for Bernardo and Budasar, maybe. Which areas that you think in IBI's expertise, which areas from your experience were more readily welcomed by Brazilian partners and the Brazilian audience that you talked to? Where you think your expertise made a difference in the discussions?
I think we are sort of like the world leader in terms of the urban planning side, placemaking, sort of like doing a master planning. So that's where we got a lot of attraction as well. We are also a leader in terms of the tolling systems as well. But we were not very successful in terms of reaching out to the concessionaries. In some cases, the person we got the contact was not with the same company. There was a limited time, but I do want to mention that there's a lot of Canadian interest in Brazil. If we look at the Canadian pension plan, so my retirement money is actually invested in Brazil. Brookfield owns Arteris, majority shares in Arteris. So our key expertise in as Bernardo mentioned, we are the world leading architectural firm. We are leader in infrastructure and transportation planning and engineering side as well. We have software and solutions which can provide information to the highway users in terms of the traffic updates, in terms of the road conditions. So it's I met pretty much with a lot of concessionaires through Fundacei Dom Cabreal Business School, because I had few connections over there, and I took one course over there as well. So that lead to meetings with those concessionaires, and they all welcome IBI, and they see a lot of value in our product, which was better than what's currently available in the market. The issue for us was, or you can say challenge, was to meet the requirement in terms of the pricing. And we have to import a lot of stuff from from USA and other countries. And by the time that equipment reached Brazil, there is a additional 45 to 50% cost added to it because of the taxes. So we didn't have much contact locally and that equipment is available in Brazil. It's just we didn't have that information, that who should we contact, who have that information, so we can price them accordingly. And the opportunities we bid, in some cases, we lost the opportunities because we were overpriced, and our pricing was based on North American product, not the Brazilian local product.
Fantastic. Well, we have to talk about this in a very next days. We're reaching the end. In fact, I did receive a couple more questions for Silvia and Bruno and for Igor. But given the time, what we'll do is we'll forward the questions and get the answers and make sure that people get it. And so to close the session, I would like to invite Paulo Castro, the Executive Director of the Chamber, for the parting comments. Paulo?
Yes, I guess we have another guest before myself.
Oops.
No.
Did I miss anybody? Who did I miss, Paulo?
Sorry, Marcio. We would like to call Walter Mendes.
Sorry. Oops, Walter, my apologies.
No problem, Marcio. And Paulo and Elisa, they asked me to make a wrap up of some final comments about what we listen here. And it's a big challenge because a lot of information have been done, have been given here. And I will try to make a summary of the information or the issues or data I think are the most important ones. And we started with Igor Rocha from Abdibi, and he showed how investments in infrastructure in Brazil have been very low and much lower than we need to cover the necessities of the country. Okay? Then when we compare the investments in infrastructure among all other countries, let's say China has invested 13% of GDP, Argentina 3%, India 4.5%, and Brazil only 2%. And he highlighted that investments investments in infrastructure in comparison to GDP, they have decreased. They have been very low historically, and they have decreased in the recent years. And in 2014, they reached the 2.4% of GDP, and 2020 only 1.7% of GDP. And then we have a big lack of investments in infrastructure in Brazil. And he highlighted the necessity of investments in transports and logistics, and we are expecting that these investments that they could increase 3 times in 5 years, okay, the level of annual investments, and in sewage and water supply 6.5 times, and also in the next 5 years. Then even with these investments that are we are expecting according to the bids and the PPIs we have in the pipeline, we will need much more in order to offset the necessities of the country. And Bruno Soares, then from the government, the Secretary for Infrastructure of the Economy Ministry, they showed that now we have an organization in the government, a council organizing all the PAN issues to improve the privatization and the associations and the projects of the association of the government and the private sector in order to improve the investments. And he highlighted also that in 2020 we had 29 auctions in infrastructure, mainly in airports and railroads, but we are expecting a big increase in the number of auctions. Then we have 197 expecting new projects in infrastructure in ports, oil, highways, energy, mining, airports, again, forests, and so on. And it's interesting to observe that some of these investments are linked to mining business and agribusiness. And those are business in which our countries very competitive in worldwide. Okay, then they have this very good issue to be observed. And the other point is, I think we have seen already a lot of investments in solar power and wind energy in Brazil. They have increased a lot, and we still have a lot of space then to be and a lot of opportunities in this area. In the privatization deals, then I'd like to highlight the Eletrobras, the electricity holding of the federal government that will be sold in some point in the future, and the post office. Okay, then those will be very important deals, very important in the privatization area. And Silvia Bernardino and Bruno Alves, Drought, they highlighted the legal aspects of this infrastructure investments. Then in general, we see that the investors, they have to be very careful in order to when to access these investments. They have to be to make a close follow-up what is going on, close follow-up of the opportunities, and a deep knowledge of the opportunities are very needed. And Bruno highlighted the point that it's important to do not expect the RFP in order to make a proposal, but to analyze everything before the RFP, because maybe we will not have time, okay, after the RFP to fulfill all the requirements for these investments. And he highlighted also some key points that
often are neglected in this analysis. The bureaucracy in Brazil is very complicated. The consortium must be analyzed and closed before the RFP and so on. There are a lot of legal issues, but the most important is that we have legal companies and legal advisors that could really advise the companies, advise the investors to deal with all these issues. They have been known already, and we see, fortunately, we have these companies, these legal advisors to help the investors. And one point that I'd like to highlight in these issues is the environmental issues and the regulatory issues. They have been, they must be addressed very carefully, because it's, we see that, we know that here and then sometimes we have some surprises, okay, and this environment with the environment agencies. And finally, the antitrust agency, CADE, also must be addressed. It's important to understand how they work, or what they think about the antitrust issues in particular sector. And finally, Bernardino, and finally, Bernardo Ortiz and Madra Sar from IBI Group, a Canadian group that are here already investing in Brazil and working with projects and the technology, buildings, infrastructure, and so on. And they showed and they emphasized some opportunities and some lessons learned during these activities in Brazil since 2019. Then they emphasized that opportunities in infrastructure and in the technology, they really exist, and they are very interesting. And the brand of the country, Canada, is a very good brand. They emphasized also that it's very important to analyze the tax issues. Taxes in Brazil are also very complicated. And the importance of to be in contact with the CCBC and the embassy here in Brazil, because they are good advisors, okay? And to understand the local culture and the language, the culture. Anyway, they understand the country that is very different from the countries in North America, and to have a long-term strategy. Okay? And the questions, I noticed that the questions were focused on energy shortage in Brazil due to the drought. Okay, and then this is a big concern nowadays in Brazil, and but that will raise certainly some good opportunities of investments in energy in Brazil. Okay, then it's a problem nowadays, but it's also, and there will be a good opportunity for new investments in many types of energy. Okay, this is my comments. Thank you.
Walter Mendes, President of Vivestor, with probably the toughest job of today, doing a summary of a very complex business. And now over to Paulo de Castro, Director of Institutional Relations of the Chamber. Paulo. You're muted, Paulo.
Yeah, thank you, Marcio. Thank you, Walter. Good afternoon, bonjour, boa tarde, everyone. My name is Paulo de Castro, and I'm the Director of Institutional Relations and Business Affairs of the Chamber of Commerce Brasil-Canadá, based in São Paulo, but with also an office in Montreal. We're very honored to organize this panel in partnership with the Canadian Consulate General in São Paulo, with our sister chamber, the Brasil-Canadá Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, and with the support of Trench Rossi Watanabe. Especially regarding to infrastructure, the CCBC has an Investments and Infrastructure Committee. Through this committee, the Chamber promotes exchange of information, brings together companies and investors from both countries, assists in government access and advocacy, and other initiatives to help identify and promote business and investment opportunities. We would like to thank you all for your participation today. Special thanks to our host, Marcio Francischini, that managed brilliantly all the program we had, the tough program we had today. And we hope to see you all in the future with our activities at the CCBC, especially in the Infrastructure and Investments Committee. Thank you. Merci. Obrigado.
Merci, Paulo. Stay tuned. Lots of things happen at CCBC in São Paulo. Stay tuned with us. More to come. Thank you very much.
Have a nice weekend.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.